It's Sean Bone from Rock History Canada. As most of you heard yesterday, Terry Draper of the band Klaatu has passed away. He was 73 years old. We've got two interviews with Rock History Network that we did with Terry. One in the 80s that I didn't do, but a cohort of mine did it, and we now have it in our possession. The last one was from a couple of years ago, where we're putting together a Klaatu special that we're almost finished with. And we talked to Terry for, I'm not sure how long it was, but at least an hour, about his career and his career with Klaatu. So we present to you our entire interview with Terry Draper, a really nice guy. Terry Draper of the band Klaatu has died. He was 73. Draper was a Canadian musician best known as the drummer and co-songwriter for the progressive rock band Klaatu. He passed away May 15th, 2025, surrounded by his family. He was born September 22nd, 1951 in Toronto, Ontario. He's a gentleman whose musical journey left an indelible stamp on the world of rock music. In 73, Terry joined forces with John Woloschuk and Dee Long to form Klaatu, a band renowned for its very unique blend of progressive rock and pop. Their enigmatic presence and refusal to perform live led to widespread speculation that they were in fact a secret reunion of the Beatles. The rumor was fueled by the 1976 hit Calling All Occupants of Interplanetary Craft, which was later covered by the Carpenters. Terry co-wrote the track, along with a lot of other notable Klaatu songs like Prelude and December Dream, the latter serving as a tribute to John Lennon. After Klaatu disbanded in 1982, there were reunions, short-lived, but after the early 80s, Terry continued his musical pursuits, releasing a lot of albums. And it was these records that showcased his versatility and his passion for storytelling. His solo works included albums like Light Years Later and Infinity. His records explore themes ranging from personal introspection to cosmic adventures. Terry Draper was known for his very innovative approach to songwriting and his ability to weave intricate narratives into his gorgeous compositions. And his work has inspired many. And lastly, Terry Draper was known as a very open individual. Easy to interview, I found that out, but always willing to talk to fans and young musicians, helping any way he could. May he rest in peace. Your favorite Klaatu memories? Any solo works that you enjoyed? Maybe your interactions with Terry? Share them here. What kit did you use on the first album?
Just a 4-piece regular drum kit, sort of a pearl finish, 9-ply maple Rogers. What's interesting is the Hope album. I took the 2 tom-toms and I took the hoops to Drummer's Paradise down on Church Street, and they made calfskin hoops for me, calf skins. They put them on the hoop. So the drum sound on the Hope album, the second album, is these calf skins, the real thing. And they were difficult to tune and keep in tune because they're different thickness everywhere. But it was worth it. It was worth it. And I didn't break them until the album was finished. So I made it through. It was a great drum sound.
You ended up being sort of a multi-instrumentalist. Back then, were you playing other instruments?
Yes. I taught myself to play guitar when I was living in Yorkville in the late 60s. And I guess about 1971, I bought a piano and began teaching myself to play piano. But working with John and Dee, both of them had grade 8 piano, and they were both very proficient, and they both played guitar, and they both played bass, and I was only there because I could play the drums fairly proficiently,
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm a Voyager. Tell me about I'm a Voyager. I love the video. I love all your videos. There's a lot of work put into your videos.
There's this fellow, Jamie Grant. He reached out to me a few years ago and wanted me to play drums on a song he was working with Scott McPherson. It was called McPherson Grant. And so I played the drums for them, and I used brushes and timpani and, something a little on the outside. And they were both much taken with what I had done for them. When I put out, about 3 albums ago, I put out a best of collection. I call it near misses, not greatest hits. One of the songs was a new song I added to it. It was called Fish, and about getting away from the problems in life, especially the politics. Sometimes I wish that I could be a fish and I could live within the ocean. So I reached out to Jamie and said, hey, would you, how much do you charge to do a video for me? Because he'd done a bunch for his band, and I thought they were great. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'd be happy to do it for you for future considerations. Okay, whatever. And so he did, and it turned out great. And then the last album, Sunset on Mars, I sent him a couple of songs, and he kept saying, okay, what's next? What's next? And before we knew it, he had made videos of all 16 songs. Every song on the album. And most of the time I just let him go with it, whatever he wants to come up with. One of the songs he used, video from Tomorrowland, the George Clooney movie, and something else. And he says, do you have any concern? I said, not really, just go ahead. Nobody knows I'm out here. Just do your thing. And if we get sued, maybe I'll get some notoriety. Who knows? He does a great job. Sorry.
Notice the bat scene from Anchorman 2? That's one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God.
Yeah, he's got a great sense of humor. Well, that song, Home, is about the pandemic, and I had no intention of even going there. Everybody I know is writing a pandemic song and this kind of thing, and I just, I said, that bus is full, I'm not getting on it. And then one day I was just playing this weird chord progression, and the words just fell out. It's like, somebody told me I should stay in the house. Somebody told me I should cover my face, so I covered it up just in case. I don't know,
Yeah, I love that.
I don't mind. I'm going to stay at home. So when he did the video, he threw that little bit of the bat scene in it. I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah. What is it? The chicken of the cave.
Yes, Lisa Michaels.
First of all, I remember thinking, do I know her? I kept thinking she looked really familiar, and I'd heard her before. How do you know her? How far back do you go with her?
Brand new relationship. I was familiar with Super 8, her band, and some of the things that she posts. Some of the groups I'm in on Facebook are power pop, and that's mostly her world. And I'd seen a couple of her videos, and not only is she very attractive, but she's got this really soft voice, and it's like a transparent voice. And I thought I wanted to have some background vocals, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just reach. I said, I messaged her. We're Facebook friends, of course. I said, hi, would you like to do some background vocals? Do you have the ability to do them at home and not have to, rent a studio or whatnot? And she says, oh, I'd be delighted. Send it along. And she loved it. And then I said, hey, we're doing a video. Can you just film yourself on a green screen singing these bits? And then I think she's in the video more than I am. Jamie was much taken with her, too.
Yeah, she's whimsical. She's just got a certain... First of all, I thought, is that his wife? And then I went, like I said, I thought, I've seen her before. And I had.
Yeah.
By the way, that little house you're standing in front, that little shed house thing, where is that?
That's my shed in the backyard.
Did you build that?
Yes. I've had a career in construction all my life, so that's what
that
I've
was
been
really
doing.
Cool. My wife said, ask him about the tiny house.
It's that house started off as a playground for my two sons, and it had a second floor, and it had a rope ladder and a fire pole and a slide and a couple of swings and the whole thing. And as they stopped using it and into their teenage years, I turned it into a shed. I have 3 sheds in my backyard, and all of them have hardwood floors. Because we used to do a lot of hardwood flooring, and there would be leftovers, and you can't throw it out. And so I got nothing to do this afternoon. Let me shoot a hardwood floor in the shed. That's pretty cool.
Colin Blunstone of the Zombies had told me a few months ago, he said, well, he left, the Zombies broke up before Time of the Season became a hit. He went and decided to do insurance. And I said, yeah, but you're standing, and I'm going to ask you the same question. I said, you're in this office, and did someone come up and say, aren't you the guy from She's Not There? Tell her no. Do people recognize you? He says, well, no, for the most part, he said, people that were there to work. And I went, freaking Colin Blunstone. But for you, through the years, when you're doing your construction stuff, weren't people come up to you and say, aren't you that guy from Klaatu?
I don't get a lot of that. If it comes up in conversation, some people say, I remember that band. And part of that whole thing was the anonymity angle.
Yeah.
that we took on in order to maintain private lives. I got to tell you, it really, really worked. Nobody knows who the hell I am. It's hard to, it's hard to get the time of day from somebody. But I got to tell you, though, just like Colin, I'm not sure, just like Colin, but the best thing that ever happened to me was the day Klaatu broke up. I didn't know it then. But that day, the music business, each album we did sold less than its predecessor. So when we got to the fifth album and we were coerced into touring it, and that was fun for about 30 seconds. When that finally died, couldn't get a gig, couldn't get a record deal. In 5 short years from being the Beatles, we were cast aside by the music business. And that was the day I quit the music business. And I said, I'm done. I went back to construction, and I had children and built a house and got married, and I've traveled a lot of the world. And, we have a winter property in Florida that I'm dying to get back to because it's getting a little chilly up here. And I never quit the business of making music. I just quit being in the music business. So this new album coming out called Lost comes out next month is my 17th solo album. And I don't sell great numbers of them, a few hundred, maybe more, not a lot. But I can't help doing it. I love doing it, and it's a discovery all the time. I'm always learning about the music. The more you learn, the less you know. It's that kind of thing, and I think it keeps me mentally active.
Don't you find a lot of prog rock sounds metalish now?
You know what? I don't listen to other people's music. I don't listen to the radio. People say, "Oh, Terry, you've got to hear this new album by so and so," and it's like, you know what? There's all this stuff going on inside my head. I don't need interference, So I don't even listen to my old Moody Blues albums much anymore. I just don't listen to music. I'm working on my own thing every day, writing little poetry and lyrics and chord progressions, and the studio's right underneath me here in the house, and I spend most of my time in there. This whole self-isolation thing hasn't touched me. It's what I do. Yeah.
How are your kids with music? Where are they musically?
There's a couple of gold records hanging up in the house, and so they were aware of what I was doing. Plus, I never stopped. I mean, I've never stopped making music. Yeah. I'm recording all the time, and I've always had recording devices and equipment and all that stuff, and musical instruments all over the house. The one son, the older son, Alex, didn't really take to it. My younger son, Adam, is a remarkable drummer, much better than I ever was. He lives in Sydney, Australia now for the last 5 or 6 years. When we were down there visiting him in 2016, we went to see his band play. They were called Three Islands. And it was cool. I watched him, go through all of this. I remember one Christmas I bought him a John Bonham drumming book. I think it was just Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 were in it. And anyway, I told him, I said, here's the book for you. And I'll tell you what, when you can play Good Times, Bad Times, I'll give you $100. And so a few months later, he calls me down in the studio. He says, Dad, check this out. You're going to owe me some money. And he plays it spot on. And I said, geez, Adam, that's really good. When you can play it at the right tempo, call me. Because he was, doom, ba-ba, doom, boom, boom, with the kick drum going. I mean, it's quite a busy song and very difficult to play. And now he can play it at full tempo, of course. But it was fun. I used to go and see him in his bands. They were doing Weezer covers and stuff like that. One of his buddies was writing songs, and I remember we went to see them at a Battle of the Bands at the El Mocambo. And the previous time that I had been in the El Mocambo was when Klaatu played there.
El Mocambo, April 1.
There you go. And it was such a joy to come back to this place and watch my son on the stage.
Wow.
It was cool, full circle. And I've done a couple of, I put a band together, just threw something together to play a couple of charities. I had a friend who was having some real issues. Rick Gunn, he's gone now. So when I put the little band together, I got my son Adam to play drums in it. I played piano, And we actually did a version of Calling Occupants. And it was really cool to look over my shoulder and watch him play the big drum fill that takes us home, you know? That was pretty nice.
Yeah, no kidding. What a nice rite of passage for him too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you still have Acetate, the album from Karen and Richard, when they wrote you that note?
Yeah, it's on the wall right there. You can't see it.
Okay.
Let me see. I think the acetate might be downstairs in a drawer, but the cover itself, the generic white sleeve, I framed it and it's hanging on the wall.
I know you were a Carpenters fan. That must have been, and I was just listening to one of your earlier interviews this morning, the fact that you're right, they were like half of ABBA and they were super clean, but there was something about her voice and that combination, the brothers, you know, people, I remember my first reaction was, is that her husband? But no, God, that's her brother. They were an amazing, amazing band. They don't get played.
Well, they knew how to pick a good song.
Yeah.
You know, they looked to Burt Bacharach and Paul Williams. They just picked the best songs. And there's something I've always liked, that those chromatic chord progressions, like Rainy Days and Mondays and stuff like that. It's so well written and so well performed. It's just that when I'm listening to music back in the day, you know, when we were making the Klaatu records and I was listening to Genesis and King Crimson and ELO and ELP and Yes and everybody, whenever I'm listening to those records, I'm at work. I'm dissecting it. How are they doing that? What is that chord progression? What's going on here? So sometimes, like you and like normal people, I don't mean to say you're normal, John, but like regular people, sometimes you just want to listen to music.
Yeah.
And when I felt like that, I would put on Sinatra or Streisand or the Carpenters. Yeah. Roy Orbison was a favorite go-to. And I wasn't competing with them, and I wasn't working, trying to understand what they were doing. I was just enraptured by the sounds I was hearing.
What was the criteria for the band? Like, what did you guys sit down and go, we're going to do what? Like, what was the criteria?
You know, the criteria was very simple. If somebody brought a good song in, we would record it. And our goal was to make the song sound as much like itself as possible. And if it didn't ask for drums, we didn't put any. And that's one of the things that I learned from that whole experience, and I only see it in retrospect now, is that most musicians and bands, they make music with their hands. With Klaatu, we made the music with our ears. We made the songs that we wanted to hear, not the songs we wanted to play. And so, like, it's like when we're recording those songs, most of the time we recorded one person at a time. So let's say Dee's out there in the studio, and John and I are sitting with Terry Brown in the control room, and Dee's doing these licks in a verse, and he's playing away, and it's like, hey, Dee, that was great. But the second lick, when we do it again, can you end on the minor third? It'll be more dramatic. It'll set us up for the next lyric. He says, okay, got that. So this is how it worked. It wasn't about the people that weren't playing the instruments seemed to have more control sometimes. So it was all about the final product and what was best for that song.
Were all three of you okay with not? I mean, who came up with the? I mean, someone had to say it first. We don't want our names on the cover. We just want the music to speak for itself.
I think that was John mostly. John is a very introverted person and really a very private person. And I think that was his idea. And both Dee and I went, oh, yeah, well, that's a good idea. Because we were working in the same studio with Terry Brown as Rush and Max Webster. And Getty couldn't even go to the 7-Eleven and buy milk without getting harassed. And that's okay when you're 17. But we were very mature 25-year-olds. And didn't really want that kind of notoriety. We wanted millions and millions of dollars in success and fame and still have our private lives. Didn't work out. I got my private life, though.
By the way,
I'm happy about that.
When you left and the band broke up after the final album, you said you didn't leave music, but was there a point of breathing and not doing music after that, or did you just keep doing music after the band broke up?
I kept doing it. I just kept doing it. I was writing a lot back in those days, and it was hard to compete with John and Dee. They're both great songwriters, and they're busy doing their own thing. They don't have a lot of time for Terry. I understand. But so I had this backlog of stuff that I'd been writing during those Klaatu albums.
Like the Children March. Could that have been a Klaatu song?
Yeah, I guess so. I never played it for them. They didn't particularly want to hear what I was doing. That was 1977. I wrote that.
Yeah, because that fits right in. I mean, that's.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it was tough. I'm working with two brilliant songwriters. And so, yeah, your question is, after the band, did I take a break? No, I went right back and started up my construction business. I had a roofing business at the time. I went at it with a vengeance, and had crews working for me, and I was making a really good living. And I hadn't done that ever in my life. I'd been in bands and all the time, and living on the edge, fighting to make the mortgage on my little shack $200 a month. Yeah. It was a struggle, and living on subsistence wages in the band, because we had to pay all these other people well to attract talent, like the guys from Max Webster, Gary McCracken on drums, and Mike Gingrich on bass, and eventually Terry Watkinson joined Klaatu live.
Yeah. So
we had to pay them well in order to attract that level of talent, and we had to, get by. So when the band broke up, it was like, you know what? There's stuff I want to do.
Yeah.
And the way I want to live.
Everyone thinks that they just love a reunion, but sometimes it's not possible, or it's not feasible, or they don't get the big picture. They don't know what they don't know, the fans, sometimes.
You know what? Being in a band is just like a marriage. Yeah. Only there's more than two people. In our case, it was only three, thank goodness. But a lot of cases, there's 5 or 6 people. Can you imagine trying to get all these people back together after the water's gone under the bridge? Yeah, I see it all the time on the Klaatu fan pages. Please put out another album, get back together. It's like, I just feel like saying, hey, you go live with your ex for 6 months and call me. Go back there. You go back there and do that. Nobody wants to go backwards.
By the way, when you went back to construction, were you previously good with your hands? Had you done that before the band?
Yeah, that's what. Well, all through, like during the first Klaatu album, that took 3 years to make.
Yeah,
and we all had jobs outside of that, and I was out roofing, trying to make a living, and I also had a job. I was the head of the 45 department at Sam the Record Man at Young and Dundas. Yes. And I wasn't an arms dealer. These 45s were little plastic records with a song on each side. That was fun. That was fun working there.
Afternoon in Amsterdam. Obviously you took that while you were on vacation.
Mm-hmm. That's what happens. A lot of people take little snapshots and send home postcards. Well, I like to take a lot of pictures, but I write poetry while I'm away, and these things morph into songs. And we spent a lovely day in Amsterdam, a few days actually. And that morning, while we were getting ready to go into town, we're staying with some friends. They had the worst summer storm they'd had in 100 years. And when we went in, we took the little boat ride and did the touristy stuff. And some of the canals were closed because there was trees down, and it was a real mess. But it was just fascinating. There was this dark, salty air. And I when I ended up writing the song, it had a bit of a foreboding darkness about it, till we get to the end, and it's, oh yeah, these people are great. They want to party. So yeah, that happens a lot with me.
For you, for the reaction, you knew, especially with that first album, you guys knew, right? You had something.
Yes, indeed, we did. I mean, I remember when we were making that record that once a month, Terry Brown would go to the record store and buy the top 3 albums for sale. And he would come back and listen to them in the studio to see what these people were doing. And the new Elton John album, he was cutting edge when it came to, Elton John was cutting edge when it came to engineering techniques and equipment, and digital delays.
Gus Dudgeon, his producer, was amazing.
Absolutely. And Terry Brown wanted to play with these guys. You know, you can't write a disclaimer on your album. Sorry about the sound, but we couldn't afford the best equipment, and we only had 16 tracks, not 24. You just can't do that. You have to compete with the big boys. Thank goodness Terry was aware of that and made sure that he had all the latest gear and the top stuff, and he was right plugged in. He was totally plugged in to the techniques and equipment of the day. I remember when we got the first Eventide digital delay line. It was just it was a breakthrough. You know, we had the maraca playing up in the little corner, and it had a little bubble around it with a quick delay.
Yeah.
And you couldn't do that before. The only delays that were available were like the Jimi Hendrix records, where they have the Ampex running at 7.5 or 15 IPS. So you got cha 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 cha, or you got cha cha cha, and that's it. You know.
Yeah.
Here's a great story. You'll like this, John.
Okay, of course.
When we recorded the 12-string guitar on Little Neutrino, we didn't have a digital delay yet. And in order to get the sound we were looking for on that 12-string, we wanted a really quick delay. And you can't do it with the format I just described. So what we did was we had 2 tape recorders, and we had them across the room. One was on one side of the room and one was on the other side of the room. And the one tape recorder was in fast mode, playing very quickly. The other tape recorder was in record. So what happens in order to, when I describe the Hendrix tape effect, cha, 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 that's the tape delay between the playhead and the record head. That's what's giving you that delay. The faster you play the tape, the quicker it comes. So when you double the speed to 15 IPS, inches per second, you get cha, 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 cha. Now what we're doing is we're running the tape really quickly from another machine in fast forward, so it's flying by, and you're getting and that's how we got that sound on the guitar in Little Neutrino. Plus, Dee had a pencil, and he was wobbling the tape a little bit to give it a detuning effect. And of course, 6 months later, they come out with the Eventide digital delay and the harmonizer, and all those effects are built in. You just dial them up, but it wasn't available in that day, and this is the sound we were after. You had to be really creative back in the day. I wonder who the first guy was who took his electric guitar and plugged it into the Hammond Leslie speaker. Might have been Steve Miller. Steve Miller's first album is really brilliant. It's called Sailor. And Quicksilver Girl is on it, and one song that everybody knows is "Living in the USA."
Yeah.
Living in the USA. That's a great record. Yeah. I was a big fan of Steve Miller. I had everything he recorded up until the Joker, and then it was like, what happened to Steve Miller? That was
different. Yeah, I used to play with Boz Skaggs, right?
That's right. Boz was in the first album or two.
Yeah. Calling Occupants, I was listening to your story about it this morning. It's interesting, the message that was on there, that you had an idea that because of that organization that had that message of the chorus line, that floored me. I had no idea about that. There's a whole backstory to this song that...
Exactly, and it's fairly interesting. The International Flying Saucer Bureau was a real entity worldwide. And on March 15th, 1953, they invited all of their members to have previously memorized the message. And at a specific time, simultaneously around the world, they were going to lie down, close their eyes, and recite mentally this message. And when John and I found this, it was in a book we had called The Flying Saucer Reader. I was right into Von Daniken and all that stuff. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, no, it was last year, a year ago this time, my wife and I were flying over the Nazca Plains in Peru. So we find this story and this message, and the message goes, calling occupants of interplanetary craft, calling occupants of interplanetary craft. We are your friends. Please come and visit us in peace and help the ignorant ones in our world. It goes on and on and on. And John and I looked at each other, and it's like, well, what if we take this and make a song? and it gets like all this airplay, and surely the airwaves and will emanate further than our puny brains, and maybe they'll come and save us, you know? So far, nothing. No one's knocked on my door. No tiny green man. I have seen nothing. But that won't stop me trying.
Well, what's your take on aliens? And I know that you've touched on it, that's for sure.
Here's a great analogy. This puts it in perspective for me. I go down to the ocean with a spoon, and I pick up a spoonful of waters. There's no whales in it. Whales don't exist.
Yeah, it's too vast. I mean, it's just...
It's the very definition of infinity.
Yeah. Well said. I've never... Sometimes you got to really dumb it down so that you can't escape the logic, right?
Yeah.
By the time you guys broke up, you said you had enough. How did that happen? Did you guys sit down and say, we can't do this anymore?
Actually, halfway through the Klaatu live edition, which only lasted about 9 months, Dee had already bailed. In order to make the 5th album, we had a very small budget. It was for Canada only, for Capitol Records. And we made a deal with Dee, who was building his own studio, that we would give him all the money we got. You rent all the gear. We need this, we need this, we need this. And you give us unlimited time. And when we're finished, we'll walk away. You got the gear, or the lease of it, and it's up and running, this decent equipment and whatnot. And then we'll walk away. So that's what happened. And then we were on the road for a while there, and Dee just got fed up and said, my studios needs me. I'm the chief engineer. Bye. So he left. And John and I soldiered on for a while, but it was just hard to make the jump from playing the bars to the soft cedars. Klaatu was a novelty act, I think. I think that's how people thought of us. And once they'd come to see us, it was like, oh, okay. I saw them. It was like, the first concert I was ever at, John, my mom took me to the CNE. I saw the Three Stooges live.
Really?
Larry, Moe, and Curly Joe. About 1959, 1960. That was my first concert.
What was your reaction to that?
I was a big fan of the Three Stooges. I wasn't old enough to appreciate the Marx Brothers yet. Wow. And so, that was. I mentioned that because I'm talking about novelty acts. And I think that's what people saw Klaatu as. Oh, this is the band that was rumored to be the Beatles. Isn't that nice? Oh, they're good. And then they went on to other things, We just didn't have a real following. A small following and fanatic, but it just never translated. We couldn't get out of the bars. It was just going in circles. Didn't have a record deal. Nobody wanted to sign us. It was just terrible.
Well, I can't say that I wouldn't have been coy like Frank Davies was. I can't say that I wouldn't have done the same thing, because it's always about what's the spin, how do you do it? They gave me that idea. Okay, well, I'm not going to say it isn't. I can't say that I wouldn't have done the same thing.
Yeah, I know. Frank was a rock and a hard place, It was his record label, Daffodil Records in Canada. He was selling a lot of records, and you don't throw water on that fire, as a rule. So and nobody knew what was going to happen or what was going to come of this. It was just one day at a time. Maybe we'd have played it differently with management, and they would have said, "All right, you know what? We're putting the band together. We're hitting the road. Let's take advantage of this situation now. Let's strike while the iron's hot. Let's go out there with an orchestra or whatever it takes, and let's go and play this stuff. Let's blow their minds." Yeah, maybe. But, there was just us three guys, and Terry Brown was our producer and engineer. Frank Davies was not our manager. He was just the owner of our record label. He was our spokesman, and we elected him to that position. And he was our mentor for many, many years, even after Klaatu broke up. And we did different things, like put out a greatest hits package with Attic Records and Al Mayer. Frank Davies was instrumental in putting us in touch. And You know, we always went to Frank when we needed something done.
Yeah. In an alternate universe, and I told this to Dee yesterday, I said, take out Steve Smith and that review, take that out, and let's just say the album kind of sank. The album was going to go where you guys in the beginning thought, oh, it's too bad we put all this work, and all of a sudden. But I'm of an alternate universe thinking there's no way that without any of that, that album would have disappeared up until modern time. I think someone would have picked up that album. I find it hard to believe that album would have disappeared forever. I think someone would have said, wait a minute, look at this. Someone would have rediscovered that. I find it almost impossible that it wouldn't have been without all of that in the past. As an alternate universe thing.
I've often thought about this, and I'm sure Dee has too, and John. I mean, we've always thought of that whole Beatle rumor as a Damocles sword hanging over our head. It cuts both ways. Would you and I be talking right now if Steve Smith hadn't written that article? Perhaps we would. Perhaps we'd be way further ahead. Perhaps I'd be in a much bigger house. Although I must confess, I'm quite happy, and this is a big house. You know, sometimes a weed, sometimes a rose. You never know what you're going to get. You know. And I just, you know, you take life as it comes, and we did some really good work. Extremely proud of some of those Klaatu records. Some brilliant work, I might go on to say. It is what it is, you know. It just we did what we could do, and there was a backlash that the public thought we duped them and perpetrated some rumor. And we're victims of the rumor as much as the public was. But we had no management. We just looked after ourselves. And when this rumor broke, and it was like, you know, they wanted us to come out of the closet, if you will. And we had sat down and said, well, what are we going to do here? You know, there's only 3 guys who can't play live. The polyphonic synthesizer hadn't been invented yet. We would have needed to take the Toronto Symphony Orchestra with us to go and to play this stuff live. It just never, and we didn't want to play live anyway, but it just never occurred to us. And so we said, you know what, let's just stick by our guns. Let the music speak for itself. Let's retain our anonymity. Let's just be these 3 guys making this music, and that's it. Let the music do all the work and let them talk. In retrospect, was that the right call? In an alternate universe, no.
You obviously like traveling. When you went to England for Hope, had you been there before? Had you traveled at that point in your life?
No, that was my first real trip, first airplane, I think.
What did it feel like?
Huh?
What did it feel like?
Oh, it was exciting. It was exciting. The first thing I did when I got off the plane, I had a car waiting. I rented. I was just dying to drive on the wrong side of the road. And we only did 3 days of recording over 2 weeks. So Dee and I did a little road trip. We drove up into Wales, and because we wanted to go to Portmeirion in Wales. And you probably don't recognize the name Portmeirion. Most people don't, but it was where they filmed The Prisoner with Patrick McGoohan. I don't know if you remember that show from the 60s. Yes. Well, Dee and I were both big fans of that show. So we got in the car and drove all the way up to Portmeirion in the north of Wales by Harlech Castle, and spent the afternoon where they filmed The Prisoner. It was very cool. But I remember we stopped for dinner. It was getting dark, and in this little village, and the only place in town was this tavern in the train station. And there's all this noise coming out of it, and people throwing darts and drinking and anything. And so we parked the car. Dee and we walked in, dead silence.
Why?
You could have heard a pin drop. Well, I had hair down halfway down my back and a big giant beard. Dee had his afro going, his frizzy hair look, and a giant beard. We looked like 2 Woodstock refugees. And Dee says, "Okay, let's get out of here." I said, "No, I'm starving." I said, let's go to the bar. So we go to the bar, and guy comes over. I said, 2 fish and chips, 2 dark, please. And then everybody starts, the rumble, and the bubble comes back on. And then we started talking to people. They found out we weren't Americans. And we left with a whole new room full of friends.
No kidding.
It was great. Yeah, it was great.
What was your reaction when someone, I know you guys found out about the Beatles thing while you were in England, how appropriate. What was your reaction personally?
You know what? We were actually in session that day. We were recording this 83-piece orchestra over top of our song Polizania, which was a fiasco. I mean, you can't imagine. 1 in 5 had headphones of these 83. There was like 20 sets of headphones or whatever. And Doug Riley's out there conducting them. And there's wrong notes being played because they forgot to put the accidental in. There's, like 10 pages of music for 83 people. When we flew over there, Doug wasn't quite finished writing the score. So he brought his friend, whose name escapes me, trombone player, Doug Mallory, I think, and who did all the transcribing. And they're doing this on the way to the studio, still transcribing stuff. And so, we're trying to get, and the orchestra is out of time. It was a fiasco. We pulled it out of the fire, managed to put it together, but it was during that session that someone came in and said, "There's this Beatle rumor. This guy has proved you're the Beatles." And we said, "Well, isn't that nice? How pleasant. What a nice thing to say. Let's get back to work."
What?
That's how it happened. That's exactly how it happened. And then we got home and the shit hit the fan.
Well, if you're going to be compared to anybody.
It wasn't a comparison. They thought we were them.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Even better than a comparison. Doesn't get any better than that from the world that John and Dee and I grew up in. I had a large record collection before the Beatles came along. I was like 10, 11 years old. I had my first LP on my 10th birthday. It was Roy Orbison's Greatest Hits. I was an avid collector of all the Phil Spector girl groups. I had all the Beach Boys 45s. I'm 11 or 12 years old here.
Wow.
And then, like everybody else, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. It was like, you know what? Maybe I can play an instrument and make music and not just buy records and appreciate it. And that was an epiphany moment. And I went out and bought some drumsticks. And a couple of years later, I got a kit to go with them. In the meantime, I was tapping on every telephone pole in Toronto.
Yeah, I can hear some Ringo in there. I could hear some Ringo in there.
Yeah.
What are the other drummers for you when you were a kid? Who were you listening to?
Well, when the prog rock thing came along, and that just destroyed me. Michael Giles blew my mind. So I mention him all the time when we talk about calling Occupants. Those drum fills are a tip of the hat to the way he played. Another great thing was we did some of the work in England with the symphony during the Hope recordings. We did at Olympic Sound. That's where those King Crimson records were made. And Deep Purple was there, and it was really a cool place to be. The Beatles, in fact, recorded a song there. Only one song they recorded at Olympic, because they worked at Abbey Road, of course. They did "Baby You're a Rich Man" at Olympic. And so it was a heady place to be, for sure.
Oh, the Prelude from Hope. Like you co-wrote that with John.
No, John did that himself. Actually, the three of us did a lot of that in the room together. And we had a little office set up in Toronto Sound that we could rehearse in, and we had put these acoustabats all around it so that to try to insulate it to some degree. And we went to the studio every day and 5 days a week, like a job, and worked on different stuff. And so then John would go home at night, and he'd come back in the morning. He said, "Okay, we got this happening here. Instead of going there, we're going to go over here." And then we'd all, work it out and play it together. And then it would twist and morph and turn. And he wanted, "Let's go over here." But that's essentially John's thing, that whole prelude. The night I quit the band I was in, it was a rhythm and blues type going blues band called the Innocence of Virgil Scott. I'd gone to the Rock Pile to see a group. This fellow that I used to buy stage clothes off had recently emigrated from England. And then we talk music all the time. And he'd say, "Hey, there's 2 bands coming out of England. If you hear about them or see their record, buy them. You won't be disappointed. He said one's called Jethro Tull, and the other one's called Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin, that's going to fly, right? So a few weeks later, I'm walking through Yorkville, and there's the marquee on the telephone pole. It says, this Sunday, the Rock Pile, Led Zeppelin, $3. So I went. I couldn't find anybody to go with me. I went by myself. And after having witnessed the best drummer in the world, in my opinion, I quit the band, put the drums in a corner, borrowed a guitar and a couple of Beatles songbooks. I could read music because I played trombone in high school, and taught myself to play guitar. I didn't, being a drummer just wasn't going to cut it anymore.
How old would you have been then?
That would have been 69, 18.
Oh, yeah. So it was first album. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
I saw Zeppelin 3 times. Every time they came to town, I saw them.
What were the other album tours? Okay, the first album, 69.
1, 2, and 3. I saw all of their touring that. Yeah, 3 was interesting because they that was at the O'Keefe Center, and there was a lot of acoustic in that, which was kind of odd. Yeah. After going to see the heaviest band in the world. Then the first night I saw them, they all come out on stage and they're late, and Robert Plant comes up to the microphone and he said, "I'd like to apologize. The customs at your officials at your border gave us a rather hard time, and this song is for them." And they went into "You Shook Me." I'd never heard the blues played so deliberately. So heavy is the only word that comes to mind. I just never heard it played like that. I had the Jeff Beck Truth album at the time. They do "You Shook Me" on it. Doesn't sound anything like Zeppelin's version, I gotta tell you.
What was your impression of Zeppelin 4?
It was good. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Yeah, I followed Zeppelin. Physical Graffiti shouldn't have been 2 albums. And then I bought Presents, and it was like, ooh, what happened here?
Presents sounded, I don't know why, it sounded too much. There was not enough low end and too much hot. I don't know what it was about Presents. It didn't, it's not that it sounded like a different band, but a little bit sometimes. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, that's when they lost me.
Yeah. The new album cover, who did that for you?
Ted.
Was that Ted?
Ted and I have been very close friends since I met him in 1975. I was working at Sam the Record Man, head of the 45 department, and there was this fellow that came in regularly, a record collector. His name was Gary Gilbert, and we'd talk about music and this and that and what was going on. He came in to see me one day, and he said, "Look, there's a 45 going around. I wonder if you can get me a copy. See if you can order it." I said, "What is it?" He says, "It's Jimi Hendrix doing Auld Lang Syne." I said, "Yeah, that's what I said." I said, "Really?" I said, "Okay." So the next day I called a friend of mine, worked at WIA, and I said, "Hey, you know, one of my customers came in, he's looking for this," and Hendrix was with Warner Records, right? And looking for this 45 Auld Lang Syne. He says, "How the hell did you hear about that? I got a few boxes here. It's for industry people only. It's supposed to be a secret." I said, "Well, I don't know." So he sends me a box, like 25 copies in a box. And the next time Gary Gilbert came in the store, I gave him a few copies. He wanted to know how much money. I said, "No charge to me, no charge to you. Here you go." And I still have a copy of it. It's got it's a picture sleeve, 45, Auld Lang Syne on one side, and the other side is a Little Drummer Boy and Silent Night. And the treatment is, of course, Star Spangled Banner. You can hear it. And so, you know, I endeared myself to Gary with that offering. And back then, working on the first Klaatu album, and every person I spoke to, "Do you know any artists? Do you got any artists, friends? I'm looking for an artist." And of course, Gary said, "Oh yeah, I have a friend. He's a really good artist." Yeah, everybody says that. But I would go and chase the paper and chase the trail. And that's how I met Ted Jones. They were neighbors. And I went over to see Ted. And he had this painting he'd done in high school. I think for grade 13. He didn't go to any classes except art. And he had this 5 foot by 5 foot painting of some Hindu goddess sitting on a lotus leaf, kind of like Axis Bold as Love album cover.
Yeah.
And I knew right there, I'd found the guy I was looking for. And so John and I had always talked about when we put an album out and when we had a band that we would use the sun as our logo and our mascot, because our running joke was it was free advertisement because the sun came up every day. And so we decided to Ted to, you know, we told him what we wanted on this album cover, the sun's face and all that. Well, I've posted it somewhere online, I think. I'm not sure where. And it's also in the remastered version of our first album. The pencil sketch that Ted first brought to us has this jolly face with the border around it and the vines and the plants and everything. But it looks like Ernest Borgnine, kind of like Santa Claus. And it was like, no, Ted, okay, time out, Ted, time out. What we're looking for is something a little more androgynous, something a little otherworldly, but still human. And so, and that's when the next time he came to us, he had this Mona Lisa type face, and it was like, bingo, good work, Ted. And then we said, now we need a receiver of the sun's rays. We need some kind of creature in here, you know, to receive the benefit of this beautiful sun. He comes back to us. Damn it, if he hasn't drawn a beaver in the foreground there. We said, no, Ted, time out. That's way too Canadian, buddy. We're trying to get rid of all that. We want to be, you know, we don't want to be provincial. We want to be worldly. And so John gave him a Beatrix Potter book, a couple of Beatrix Potter books, and Ted came back with the mice.
Yeah, classic, man.
So Ted and I have been friends ever since. We've done a lot of renovations together. Eventually, I got too old to have a roofing business, so I started doing decks and fences, and then I moved inside because of inclement weather and started doing flooring and trim, you know, whatever, you know, just construction stuff. And Ted was still doing that up until recently. And when he needed an extra pair of hands, like if he had to install a kitchen, I would go and help him. Really hard to hang cabinets by yourself, you know. Mm. So we do renovations together. He'd get a job to do a hardwood floor. And now we're starting to get old, the two of us. So what we do is we go and do the hardwood floor together. One guy runs back and forth to the saw. The other guy stays on his knees, doesn't get up. It's not the work that kills you, it's the up and down. So, Ted and I are great friends. He just finished the new album cover a couple of days ago. He moved out to Nova Scotia. He's living just outside of Truro because he's, you know, retired from construction. He couldn't find any work in the world of fine art. Go figure. And he couldn't afford to live in Southern Ontario anymore. So he moved out to Truro. He's got some friends out there. He did this back in the spring. No, this summer. And I said, Ted, please, whatever you do, don't put your paintings in storage. He says, you know, they'll get ruined. It's cold. I said, bring their stuff. I'll look after all your stuff. He says, oh, Terry, that's really nice. So my house is full. I got to show you.
Please.
This room, this is my library. It's just full of Ted's work.
God.
Look at the size of this thing. It's like 4 foot by 4 foot. I use this for my album called Stranded.
Yeah. That's gorgeous.
Yeah, there's all kinds of in here. Here's the original for my first solo album. He had this painting done, and I said, hey, Ted, can I use that? He said, great, what are you going to call it? I said, well, the album's called Light Years Later. He says, all right, that's cool.
That's gorgeous.
They're all over the house.
That means so much. I mean, as a fan, I would sometimes buy albums, and they'd end up being prog a lot from bands just because I like the album cover, like Kayak from Holland. I remember looking at I'm going, I don't know who these guys are, but I'm buying this, you know. It brings you in. California Jam to me. I was listening to it again a couple of days ago. I'm going, I don't hear the Beatles, but I hear the Beach Boys in that.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that song.
John wrote that as a tribute to the music of Southern California. The Mamas and the Papas, the Beach Boys, the Association, that whole genre.
Vocal
Sonny and
bands.
Cher even.
Yeah.
And so his analogy of the San Andreas Drift song was originally called The Great San Andreas Misfortune of 1981. That was the original title of that song. That's when California falls into the ocean after the big one, and it is no more. And when we were making this album, the California sound was gone. That was over. It was a new world now. And so John was writing a tribute to that music and using the earthquake as a metaphor of how it's gone. And then we were talked out of using that title because not only it had a date on it, which is, always puts you in a hole.
Yeah. And
it was a little grandiose and a little pretentious, perhaps. So there was a concert going on in California that was supposed to be the like Woodstock, and they were calling it California Jam. And so we grabbed that title and went with it. I think that's one of the reasons we go live at the end of that song. That live audience from California Jam was taken from the concert of Bangladesh, George Harrison.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's where we got the live audience from. We had to use sound effects records back in the day. I remember when we were doing the song Polizania, when we come to the chorus and it goes, damn, Polizania, Polizania. I come up with this idea. I wanted a whip crack on the downbeat. Snap! Polizania. You'll hear it if you go listen to it. So what we did, I had a record. I worked at Sam the Record Man. So I had a great collection of sound effects records, knowing we would need them one day. And I found this whip crack. So we recorded it from a turntable onto a piece of tape. And there's the piece of tape with a whip crack on it. So now we got the multi-track over here and the whip over here. We marked the two spots of the tape with a grease pencil, so we know where we are, and we start together, and the snap lands a little late. Okay, so we back up, erase that, we back up, I move the whip a little bit back, go again, snap, got it. So we had to do that 4 times for each of the 3 choruses. There are only 2 choruses, I don't remember. And that's how we flew those things in wild back in the day.
Jeez.
There's another interesting thing, speaking about drumming, and just to show you what kind of layering Klaatu was all about. We were working on Polizania as a 3-piece, long before the orchestra, just putting it all together. And I said to the guys, I said, okay, I have this idea for a drum fill. Every time we go to the chorus, and it's going to be the same every time, and I want to have it like a siren, like a police siren. So it's da 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 da. And John would say, oh, well, that's great, let's do that. So we do that every time. In fact, that phrase appears in some other songs on the Hope album. But so eventually I had to tell John and Dee what it was. I said, well, you know what we're doing here? I said, that's SOS. So that subliminal message is in there mixed with the police siren. And it's, shit's going to hit the fan. Here we go. Polizania. Words out.
Sub-Rosa subway. I mean, that's a trip, man. How long did it take for you guys to put that together?
John and Dee had most of that together before I showed up on the scene. They used Whitey Gland to play the drums on that. I'm sure you know Whitey from his Mandela days, Don Troiano. No. He played with Lou Reed for a while. Famous Toronto musician in the R&B scene. He was in Bush with Donnie. Anyway, yeah, so when I came along, that was pretty much done. And then and it was already been released as a single. And when we did the album, we went back to it, transferred it from 16-track to 24-track, and did all sorts of extra harmonies and some other stuff, and embellished it quite a lot.